This Eastern Conference Finals Game 2 Betting Picks edition of the NBA Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. You can win up to 100 times your entry with Underdog Fantasy Pick'em. Sign up with promo code NBA SGPN to claim your special pick and a first deposit bonus offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code NBA SGPN. We're also brought to you by the Mega Memorial Merch Sale. 15% off of everything in the SGPN merch store with promo code SGPN May. Welcome, everyone, to the NBA Gambling Podcast, part of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is Thursday, May the 23rd, here to get into the NBA betting picks for the playoff game tonight. Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. We'll recap what we saw in Game 1 between the Eastern Conference Finals. Was very, very interesting. Final minutes there, getting into overtime. We'll talk about that here in a second. Of course, we'll break down everything for Game 2 happening tonight in Boston. But joining me here to help me break everything down, you guys know him as the voice of the WNBA Gambling Podcast, the Tennis Gambling Podcast, the MLB Gambling Podcast, and of course here on the NBA Gambling Podcast is Scott Reichel. Scott, what's going on, my man? How you doing?
Doing pretty well. Can't complain. Pretty interesting first couple of games, 2 competitive game 1, so hopefully that's a good sign of things to come for the rest of the series. But yeah, overall, we got some games to recap and a game to preview.
Yeah, we'll save the recap for the Western Conference Finals for tomorrow, because I know you and Terrell will be doing Game 2 of Dallas and Minnesota. But just quickly, Dallas does get it done last night on the road. Typically, they've been really, really bad in Game 1s, at least under Jason Kidd, but they did find a way to get it done last night. So I'll save the X's and O's and everything for the pod on Friday for Terrell and Scott to get into, because I think this Game 1 recap will be, at least for the Eastern Conference Finals, will probably be a bigger conversation of how this game really played out in Game 1. So the game did end up going into overtime in Game 1. The Boston Celtics do pull out the victory. Let me see what that final score was. I know it was like 133 to 128. Flies over the total in Game 1 here. But I think we can, Scott, just really fast forward to the final minute there and how the Indiana Pacers just really fumbled the game away. Literally, they had 2 key turnovers. You had Jaylen Brown hit the game-tying 3-point shot to send it into overtime. And then Rick Carlisle, I think rightfully so, taking the blame for the loss that happened in Game 1 for the Indiana Pacers, because we could again make the case that it was the same thing that happened to them in the conference semifinals in Game 1 against the New York Knicks, where they had some calls that didn't go their way, which should have. But this was more of an execution standpoint for the Indiana Pacers, where Hallie had the turnover, and then you had Siakam turning the ball over as well. But overall thoughts from Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals here, Scott?
Yeah, I thought Indiana choked. If you want to just, get right into it, Indiana had the game on a platter, and they fumbled it. Now, Rick Carlisle, I think the more that I watch him play, the less I like him. And I think he's an abysmal head coach, just by watching how this has unfolded throughout the first couple rounds, and yet he's still 4 wins away from an NBA Finals appearance. So, yeah, I feel like we've talked a lot about how the Eastern Conference is weak, how the West is better, and Rick Carlisle making it to the Eastern Conference Finals might be proof of that, because I don't know what he's doing half the time. But Indiana's in a good spot to win the game. It's not entirely on Carlisle, because his players did have the opportunity to just put the game on ice, and they refused to do it. So to go through the actual order of events here, I think it all started to unfold in the final, we'll say minute, because Indiana was up 3 with the ball. Nembhard got a rebound after Halliburton blocked Derek White's shot from behind on that solid defensive play. White should have seen him. He didn't see him. So either way, Halliburton got a free block. They got the ball. So Halliburton gets the ball, and there's about 13 on the shot clock. Once again, they're up 3 with 58 seconds left. and he takes a sidestep three-pointer to his left, which almost banked in, but it was just an atrocious shot. And then it resulted in a foul on the rebound 80 feet from the basket to give Jaylen Brown 2 free points. Okay, that's the first mistake that you had there. 58 seconds left. Halliburton takes a really crappy shot, results in 2 free throws for Boston. Then
Now,
Nembhard makes a jumper.
hold on, let me stop you there, Scott. Did you think that was a foul on Siakam? Looking at the replay, because it seemed like Jaylen Brown had a handful of jersey on Siakam.
To be honest, when you're hand fighting like that and they call a foul on the floor, it's going to stand. I don't think you can really overturn that one way or another. Officiating's a separate point we can get into because Boston did attempt 20 more free throws. I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm just going to focus on the late game execution. We talk about free throws after. So you had the Halliburton questionable shot, and that resulted in 2 free throws for Boston. Nembhard makes a shot. Tatum bricks a 3. Nembhard gets the rebound with 34 seconds left. Halliburton's dribbling the ball up. You're up 3. They're not going to foul you. You could drain clock, get a possession. And Halliburton chucks the ball out of bounds. He tries to do a push dribble forward to nobody, and then the ball goes out of bounds. So that's another mistake by Halliburton. Then Derek White misses a layup. Tatum misses a mid-range jumper. Tatum ends up, once again, kind of choking the game away. Turner gets a rebound. Tatum fouls him. Okay, great. Indiana's got a timeout. They're up by 3 with 8 seconds left. First of all, why is Nembhard inbounding the ball? Can somebody explain that to me? Isn't Halliburton one of the best passers in the league?
Yeah.
The argument, of course, is we want our star player on the free throw line for a shot to potentially, win the game. The most important part's inbounding the ball. They're fouling you immediately. You're up 3. You make 1 free throw, you probably win the game. Halliburton should probably be making the pass, or worst case scenario, maybe TJ McConnell. Maybe you bring him in to make a pass. But letting Nembhard throw the ball, not to mention with the timeout in your pocket, to Siakam, it is partially Siakam's fault because nobody came back to the basket. He went for a straight line to his own basket instead of cutting to the inbounder. But the point is, it just felt like the wrong guy was inbounding. They had no inbound play. They had a timeout in their pocket, and he chucked it away. Then Boston gets the ball back. You'd argue they should have fouled. Whatever. Brown makes a great three-pointer. I'm not going to overreact to it. It was a crazy shot by Brown. Great shot by him. Siakam didn't want to foul. It was the right move. He made a crazy shot. Then you use your timeout, and I don't know what you even drew up. You got Halliburton trapped at around the three-point line. He dribbles to his right and chucks up some insane fadeaway 32-footer while being guarded by 2 people. And at that point, the game was over. So Halliburton had another turnover in overtime where Holiday kind of half pickpocketed him. He chucked the ball out of bounds. But I thought Halliburton's decision-making down the stretch was absolutely terrible. And I know that Carlisle could have made a couple of tweaks, mostly the inbounder and the use of the timeout on that inbound with about 8 seconds left. But I really thought Halliburton's carelessness with the ball kind of just sabotaged the entire game because I thought that he made a bunch of really dumb decisions. And even in overtime, he got bailed out by not seeing Derek White behind him on a 3-on-1, and he somehow got 3 free throws out of it when it should have been a block. So I thought Halliburton down the stretch was atrocious with his decision-making, and I thought that was the story of the game. But I have to mention the inbound pass, which was the key moment of the game, and I thought Carlisle butchered that.
Yeah. A couple things. Again, number one, when you have the opportunity, when you're having the opportunity to move the ball into the front court and then utilize the back court.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge mistake that coaches make, not using
for worst case scenario, at least try to use the initial 5 seconds. And if you don't have it, then burn the timeout.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that makes sense too. And I think it showed the lack of experience for Halliburton in the playoffs in game 1. I know they've advanced from round 1 to round 2, but it's been pretty easy for them. I know there haven't really been a lot of clutch moments up until game 1, I would say, for the Indiana Pacers. I know that what game 1 and game 2 against New York was competitive, but it just showed a little bit that
the overtime win against Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Where Halliburton had that floater, but that's basically it.
But I think at this level, at the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that showed a little bit for Tyrese Halliburton. So it almost seemed like Siakam was trying to foul Jaylen Brown on that game-tying three-pointer. But if they would have he would have made the basket and called the foul, then it might be a different story. But nonetheless, it was an incredible shot, like you mentioned, by Jaylen Brown to send into overtime. So And yeah, look, Rick Howard came out and said the first thing he mentioned in the post game conference. He said, "This was my fault. This is all on me." And give a lot of credit to the Pacers, man. Coming off of the game 7, having only one game off in between, the opportunity again was there for them to win this ball game. But again, it was just we talked about it that when it comes down to these clutch moments, whichever team executes down the stretch, that could be the difference between not only winning and losing a game, but also winning or losing a series as well, right? And I think that really showed for the Indiana Pacers here. So we'll see how they respond here in game 2 here tonight. We'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. But just looking back at the box score from game 1, Scott, I mean, you mentioned the free throw disparity. The Boston Celtics were plus 15 as far as free throws made in game 1, and they were plus 20 in attempts in game 1. Tatum finished the game with 36 points. Drew Holiday was absolutely incredible in game 1. Played team high 48 minutes, 10 of 16 from the floor, 4 of 8 from three-point land. Also had 7 rebounds and 8 assists. Jaylen Brown got off to a great start. And if you're watching these games here, especially with the Boston Celtics, there's only one player on this team that is attacking the basket. Everybody else is settling for 3-point jump shots. The only guy that's attacking the basket is Jaylen Brown. And that's something, again, I noticed in game 1. I don't know why they're afraid to get to the basket and get easy shots, but they're just so in love with the 3-point shot are the Boston Celtics. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to me, especially going up against a team that really doesn't have that true rim protection like some of the other teams have that are remaining in the playoffs here, Scott. So that's something I'm going to be looking out here for tonight as well. That, again, I think Jaylen Brown will continue attacking the basket, but I want to see it from Jason Tatum. I want to see it from Derek White. I want to see it. Drew Holiday gets those easy baskets because he's just such a high IQ basketball player. I think that was a great pickup for the Boston Celtics. But Boston pulls one out of their ass, literally. And we'll talk about game 2 in a minute. But any other takeaways from game 1?
Yeah, I think two. First things first is that this was a game Boston, whether or not they deserve to win or not, who cares? A win's a win. This
Yeah.
is a game Boston has lost probably 99% of the time over the last 3-4 years. And the fact that they were able to actually steal one of these games where it just screamed Celtics loss. The more you were watching it and the closer the game got, you just felt like Boston was going to get tight and either
Yeah.
Tatum or somebody was going to choke. And Tatum pretty much did choke. Now, he responded well in overtime, but for the sake of the fourth quarter, he was a complete non-factor for basically the first, I don't know, like I'd say not even the first, just the entire fourth quarter. He
It's because
bricked
he's
a
too
wide
busy
open
out there.
three-pointer.
Yeah, he's jacking up 3-point shots.
He's
That's what
jacking
I
up
hate
threes,
about
but he had a
Tatum. Yeah.
wide open three. It was equivalent to like the LeBron missed wide open three against Denver, where people
Yeah.
roasted him for it. He was wide open. There's nobody near
Mhm.
him. He bricked it. Then he ended up missing a couple of drives, and he had that mid-range jumper down 3 with 15, 12 seconds left or so, and he missed that too. So
Mhm.
Tatum was awful down the stretch of that game. And then he made a couple shots in overtime. He had the and one with the McCollum foul, or the McConnell foul, I mean. But I think the main takeaway that I had there is that a lot of people were trying to praise Tatum for how he played. And based on the box score, he was incredible. He had 36 points. He had 12 rebounds. I know he gave out his points and rebounds in the underdog entry,
Mhm.
or Terrell and I did. But the point is, I think you're looking at a guy who still has some serious problems in big spots. And I know that, once again, he was able to rectify some of those issues in overtime. But as you're watching the game unfold in the fourth quarter, where the game's entirely in the balance, Jaylen Brown bailed out Tatum so hard with that final three. And I have to at least mention it because Tatum, I feel like the main issue we've had with him for years in these big fourth quarter spots, regular season or playoffs, he no-shows a lot. And we saw
Yeah.
him no-show another fourth quarter. They got away with it. Good for Jaylen Brown for hitting the shot. Ironically, the only three-pointer he made in the entire game. But I wanted to at least mention Tatum, who I thought his stat line suggested he played a lot better than he actually did. And I think
Yeah.
if you asked me as my final point who the best player on Boston was in just game 1, I would pick Drew Holiday. I thought Holiday was fantastic.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like I mentioned, one of the better, if you talk about best two-way players, I think Drew Holiday's name is not mentioned enough in those conversations, but he was absolutely fantastic. And hopefully that continues for the Boston Celtics in game 2 and throughout the series if you have money on the Boston Celtics. One more note that really stood out, that if you blindly just looked at without knowing the final score in game 1, And I told you, we talked about the free throw disparity that Celtics put up 20 more free throws. They made 15 more. And the Indiana Pacers had 21 turnovers in game one. You probably would have thought that
15.
Boston won this game by 15 to 20 points. But again, give a lot of credit to the Pacers. They're playing their brand of basketball, and they had an answer for every time the lead got stretched out for the Boston Celtics. When they got up like 7, 8, 9 points, Indiana always responded with a run and either tie the game up or took the lead momentarily. But yeah, we'll see how they respond here in game two here tonight. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And before we do talk about that here, let me tell everyone about our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Hey, look, the NBA playoffs are officially here. We're on to the conference finals. And our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, wants to make it a lot more interesting. Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. Playing their pick'em game is as simple as selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, assists, and so much more. Making entries of all basketball or mix and match across your other favorite sports, and you can win up to 100 times your money, and it's a ton of fun. Underdog is available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. Underdog will be running a ton of different promos, bonus cash airdrops, specials, giveaways, and more throughout the NBA playoffs. So make sure to follow at Underdog Picks on Twitter to keep an eye out. Underdog is available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. Sign up today with promo code NBA SGPN to claim your special pick and first deposit bonus offer up to $250 in bonus cash. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code NBA SGPN. All right, Scott, let's get into game two here tonight.
Well, I do want to ask you, before we officially get into game two, there was one other piece of NBA news, which I don't know if you want to talk about or not.
You want to talk about it now, or you want to save that for the end of the show?
It's up to you.
JB Bickerstaff?
I wasn't sure if you want to just wrap up the show with game two, but we should talk about the firing that happened earlier today.
Yeah, let's get through game two here, and if people want to, maybe I don't know, fast forward through that, or we'll save it for the end because let's get to the picks and we'll save that for the latter part of the show here because I did see that obviously did come across this morning, and know that was also something that you had mentioned when we recapped the.
It was inevitable, but whatever.
Yeah. So let's get into game two here, and then we'll talk about the JB Bickerstaff news. So game two here tonight in the Eastern Conference Finals, back at it in Beantown at TD Garden. Right now, the Celtics are sitting as a 9-point favorite again in this game with a total of 224.5. We did see a little bit of adjustment on the total here. It was around 221.5, 222 for game one, but that was blown out of the water in regulation where they combined for 234 points. But Boston did mention that Porzingis will return for game four in Indiana. So again, no Porzingis here tonight for the Boston Celtics. And not much on the injury front either for either one of these teams. Like I mentioned, only one is Porzingis, which we expect back in game four. But Scott, game twos have been tricky or have been, I guess, bad for the Boston Celtics in the first two rounds. Miami Heat won game two in Boston, and Cleveland did the same thing as well. What are you expecting here tonight from this game? -9 right now in favor of Boston.
Yeah, it's a weird spot because we kind of expected game two to be the game that Indiana would fight for a shot to win it, and that was game one. But I like the overs, obviously. I'm not going to assume that Indiana is going to suddenly learn how to guard people. I think Boston's team total is worth a look. I know you love that angle for game one. That got there even in regulation. And I think they should be in line to score 115 again, 120 again. So we'll see what happens there. But a part of me thinks Boston kills them. And I'm not sure if that's just because I feel like Indiana had a golden opportunity that they let slip through the fingertips. And maybe that might linger into game two. Or maybe Boston just plays better. Just simply put, they didn't shoot well from three. And they were able to buy, even though Tatum, once again, was underwhelming in the fourth quarter. Horford couldn't make a jump shot for most of the game, and it pains me to watch him shoot that many three-pointers. But he went 3 of 12. Horford should never be taking 12 three-pointers in a game. I don't even care how open he is, but he had 15 points in the end. It just feels to me that Indiana shot so well and it didn't matter. Indiana shot 53.5% from the floor and 37% from three. Boston shot 47% from the floor, give or take, and 33% from three. It just seems to me like there's some type of shooting regression or averaging out process that's going to happen in game two. And we've seen Boston respond well to adversity. They have won both game threes after dropping game two. So it is a bit different because this is off a win. But Boston could have definitely played a lot better, and we have seen them step up when they have an off game like we just saw. I think Boston was in line to win that game against Indiana by margin. They kept opening up some decent leads. They just kept letting Indiana crawl back into it. So a part of me thinks Indiana is going to lose this game by a decent margin. I think Boston wins this game by double digits if I had to just give a spread prediction. I think Indiana shot that well from the floor, and they still couldn't guard Boston. That was really the story of the game. Whether the free throws were, potentially, I don't want to say a rigging, but whatever reason you want to have for the free throws, the point is Indiana doesn't typically attempt many free throws because Halliburton's their best player who has the ball in his hands all the time, and he never goes to the foul line, and they jack up a lot of threes. So I think stylistically, Boston will win the free throw battle in pretty much all of these games for the most part. And I think that's going to definitely hurt Indiana because they have to shoot that well just to keep the game insanely competitive. I'm going Boston here. I think Boston wins by double digits. Give me the team total over. I don't mind the over, but I think Boston wins this game by somewhere between 12 to 17 points.
I didn't get a chance to watch game 7 of Knicks and Pacers. And this was something that I had mentioned that Rick Carlisle should probably put TJ McConnell and Tyrese out there on the floor together. And I did see that in game 1. Do you remember seeing that in the series against New York?
They did it a little bit in that
Okay.
series, but I think it was mostly in game 1 and 2 when they would kind of overlap the bench unit with Halliburton, and it worked well. And then he kept bringing Nembhard back in to close the game, and they kept losing. I think it was mostly in game 1 and 2, and then maybe a little bit in like game 7, but they didn't do it as much as they probably should have.
Okay. I think the one thing that concerns me about the Celtics, and you're right, they will more than likely come out and play a
They have
little
no
bit
killer
better here.
instinct. I think that's the point you're going to make.
And that's exactly what it is, that they don't have that ability to put away teams, and they let teams hang around. And we've seen that multiple times, not only during the regular season, but I think in the playoffs as well a little bit. I know the first 2 rounds they played 2 teams that weren't at 100%. I mentioned the same thing for the Indiana Pacers, but just the way that the Pacers play their brand of basketball at a fast pace. And I'm not sure if you watched the interview with Rick Carlisle on the Pat McAfee show yesterday.
I did not.
He just mentioned that we're going to play our brand of basketball for the full 48 minutes, and that's playing fast. And that's going to be predicated on our quote unquote, for lack of better words, our quarterback, Tyrese Halliburton, on offense. And he pretty much was saying that, the keys are in the hands of Tyrese, and he's going to make this team go. And we saw that, right, in game 1, where he was able to knock down some clutch 3-point shots at the end of the quarters. Was it at halftime and then at the end of the third quarter?
Yeah, the crazy double clutch 3-pointer that banked.
Yeah, that one was lucky at the end of 3. But then the one at halftime. But I again, the brand of basketball that they play, I think that they'll always be able to keep it within the number, especially at 9 right now. So, could this be a flat spot for Boston? I don't think so, especially how they played in game 1, because in game 1s in their first 2 rounds, they pretty much dominated in those games, and there was a flat spot for them in game 2s, where their opponent won on their floor. But you mentioned this a lot. We've talked about this a lot, that there's always that one game that they do drop at home under Joe Mazzulla in the playoffs. So is this possibly this game, or is it maybe game 5? Who knows? But I do think Indiana could keep it within the number. But I'm more intrigued by the total in this. I just don't think that the books will be able to put this high enough. And the other concern is, will Indiana be able to keep up their shooting percentage and how well they've been shooting, how they did in game 7, how they came out in game 1 and game 2. But a lot of, if you're watching the game 1, it was a lot of mid-range inside the paint baskets. I know they were able to knock down 3-point shots.
Siakam they're was also killing Horford in the mid-range the entire game.
Yeah, and I think that is something that I think will continue for this team, because Pascal Siakam is not afraid, in that mid-range. They have guys that are not afraid to attack the basket, whether it's guys coming off of the bench or whether it's guys in their starting lineup, right? I know they like to sometimes settle for the 3-point shot, but Siakam, TJ McConnell, even coming off the bench, will attack the basket. Miles Turner, we'll see him have those thunderous dunks as well. He's able to knock down the 3-point shot as well. So I think Indiana could keep it within the number here. Again, I'm more with you on the total here. I like the over, whether you want to take the Pacers team total to go over, or whether you want to go Boston on their team total to go over here tonight. I just feel like we continue seeing points here. Scott Foster is on the game here tonight, and he is more of a referee that has a friendly whistle. So maybe we see a little bit of a more balance on the free throw side of things here tonight. But in most of the games that and I wish I had the numbers in front of me, but a lot of his games have gone over the total when he has officiated, except for a game. I think he officiated game 7 between Minnesota and Denver. I think that was the one game that did go under the total. But I do expect to see a more of a friendly whistle, maybe even for the Indiana Pacers side, because of how the free throw disparity was in that game. All right, Scott, before we do get over to player props in game 2 here, it's a nice segue here, especially with the newest sponsor that we have on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. That's Rhythm. If you're betting on NBA player props like we are, then you need to download Rhythm. Rhythm gives you a menu of the best player props for every single NBA playoff game, making it easy to go through and find the best props to put your money on in seconds. Rhythm's predictions are backed by over 3 years of data and a team of data scientists and quants that focus on fine-tuning our algorithm to give you the best shot at winning. Rhythm pairs its predictions with player prop graphs to help feel even more confident in your picks, which you can make whether you normally place your bets or DFS picks. From superstar to bench players, Rhythm finds the best player prop lines, all backed by AI data, without you needing to endlessly scroll through a sportsbook. Rhythm also allows you to create your own custom NBA models, so you can get AI-backed money line, spread, and total picks for every playoff game. Start a free 7-day trial and start winning your NBA player props with Rhythm. Available wherever you do get your apps. All right, Scott, let's get into the player props here for tonight in this game 2. What are you looking at? I know you mentioned a lot of overs. Not going to disagree about that with you, but what are you looking at?
Yeah, I'll go back to Tatum. Points or rebounds, whatever you want, all the above. I think that he's just a bad matchup for Indiana. That Indiana really had no answers for him. Tatum was really not that great in the fourth quarter, and he still had he had 30 and I don't know, the first 3 quarters basically. It just felt like Tatum got to whatever spot he wanted. He still settles for too many threes, but he has been effective against Indiana. His run against the Pacers has been insane. He's had 8 straight games now with 30 plus points against the Pacers, something along those lines. I think.
I'm sorry, who did you mention?
Tatum. Tatum has had 8 straight games with 30 against Indiana.
Yeah, dating back to the regular season, it was 8 straight.
I mentioned it on the Mothership show, but that streak got extended. I forgot what the number was.
Yeah, let me.
I think it was 7. Now it's 8. I think.
All right, let's see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for the season. So now up to 9, including playoffs.
Okay, so point is 9 straight games where Tatum scored 30 plus points against Indiana. Yep. I see that continuing. So I think he's in line for a good game. I am wondering for Indiana if I should go back to potentially Obi Toppin, who was really good in game 1. He was 6 of 8. It felt like his versatility was giving Boston some problems. I think his points might be worth a look, Obi Toppin. We know that he's definitely not fearless he's not afraid of the moment. He's going to, think he's the best player on the court, so he's constantly going to be attacking the basket and trying to do his thing. I don't mind him potentially go over for his points. I just want to quickly see what that number is. I think Toppin might actually have a decent series, but should be 8 or 9.5?
8.5 minus 135.
I'll take the over on that. He had 15 in game 1, so I don't mind that. Thinking of other options, Halliburton at 25. I probably wouldn't go with him. I think Siakam rebounds is worth a look. He had 12 rebounds in the first game, but somebody's gonna have to rebound the ball for this team. And I do think Siakam double-double might be worth consideration because he was very good in game 1. He was very active. I was impressed by his commitment to helping out on the glass, which was needed in that game. So I don't mind Siakam rebounds as well in that game.
Yeah, he had 12 rebounds, did Siakam in game 1. And I think that, again, that the pace that they just play at, I think, again, we're just looking at overs in this in these
There's
games.
So many possessions.
Exactly, right? And then you take a look at Siakam during the regular season. He only played in one of the 5 matchups, which is interesting during the regular season. But he had 23 points and 6 rebounds in that span. But like you mentioned, right, he had a great game one, played 42 minutes. We know the shot volume is going to be there for him. I think this is a really good matchup for him as well. He had, like you mentioned, 24 and 12 in game one. He also had
And
7
7.
assists as well.
Yeah, if you want to throw in PRA, I don't even mind that.
Yeah. I'm also going to go back to Drew Holiday in this game if I'm going to look at his rebounds. If you want to go PRA for Drew Holiday, or if you want to go assist and rebounds to go over, that number's at 10.5. We saw what he did in game one against the Pacers. Finished up that game with 7 rebounds, 8 assists, 15 combined stats there. Probably not going to have another game where he does have 28 points, but I think the 3-point shot is going to be there for him as well. So couldn't talk you off of that. I will be playing his rebounds and assists to go over. I'm curious to see what his steals prop is, because going up against Halliburton and with the way that the Indiana Pacers play, they're going to be prone to having turnovers. And I do believe that there's always going to be the opportunity for Drew Holiday to get those steals and blocks, or if you want to look at just steals alone. So steals and blocks right now, it's at 1.5 at -170. The steals for Drew Holiday is at it's at 1.5. The over is at +140. So I think that's some pretty good value there for Drew Holiday. I want to get there with Hallie assists because he had 20 potential assist opportunities in game one.
That's so bad. 10 assists on 20 potential. That's so rough.
I was looking at this yesterday. Let me see if I still have it up. I'm sorry. Yeah, so Hallie had 20, and then I was just looking at the Boston side in particular in game one. Drew Holiday had 12 potential assists, and then Derek White also had 12 potential assists as well. So that number, I saw it at 8.5 for Hallie's assist. I think that he can get into double digits again. Right now, that's at -102, so I couldn't talk you off of that. So those were the couple I was looking at. You like anything else for player props?
Yeah, I think we'll go to Al Horford unders. I know he's had back-to-back games of going over, but I think the PRA train is going to have to go through because he went 5 of 15 in game one. For the love of God, don't take 12 3-pointers ever again. Like, for the love of God, please. But the point is, he had 15 points, he had 6 rebounds, 1 assist. He really didn't do much besides just jacking up 3-pointers. He was open on a decent amount of them, and they weren't really going in. But Horford also played 40 minutes. He played a lot. It wouldn't shock me if he maybe got less runtime in this game. Maybe he used Cornet a bit more. But Horford, 20.5 PRA. Maybe if you want to just go for points and rebounds. The rebounds really weren't great. And Tatum's done a great job of rebounding throughout the postseason, so Horford hasn't exactly had many great opportunities for rebounding. But, for example, his numbers at 7.5 in this game, just for rebounds alone. He's had less than 8 rebounds in 4 of the last 5 games, including game 1, which went to overtime. So I don't mind the under for Horford rebounds. In fact, Horford's had less than 8 rebounds in 7 of his last 8 games against Indiana. So I don't mind Horford under 7.5 rebounds, like -120.
It's interesting to see if Horford can keep up with the pace that this game is going to be played at. Yeah, so I think...
And he was being isolated constantly in the mid-range against Siakam, which dragged them away from the basket. It just didn't feel like a great spot for Horford to get rebounds in this series.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it as far as the player props.
Can I get the over on Nesmith fouls?
I had Nesmith on his 3-pointers. It was at a nice plus. I think it was like -120. He had 5 attempts. He made 1 of them, but he had 12 attempts overall. So I was a little sour on that. He did have he fouled out, obviously. I don't know, that's why you're mentioning it. And then he also had 5 turnovers in the game as well. So
I think half of them are moving screens. But
yeah. And I'll be curious to see if Rick Carlisle puts TJ McConnell out there for a little bit more minutes. He did play 25 minutes in game 1, also including overtime there as well. But it's really a 7-man, about an 8-man rotation for the Pacers, and for the Celtics, it's really a 7-man rotation. So, yeah, again, this is gonna be a series. I mentioned this when we previewed the series. We're just gonna see a lot of points being put up by these teams. All right, Scott, let's do Let's do our lock and dog and then give our underdog, and then we'll talk about the firing of JB Bickerstaff. If people want to hang around for that, we can talk about that. So let's give out our picks here, and then we'll get into JB Bickerstaff, and we'll talk about some more stuff happening around the NBA here. So you want to lead us off with your lock and dog?
Sure. So for the lock, I think I actually am going to go with the guy that I faded. I've done well. Unfortunately, did not work out in the final game of that Cleveland series. But I want to go back to it. Give me Al Horford. I'll go with the under on his rebounds, points and rebounds. Kind of wondering what I should go with. He might just attempt 12 threes again. He might just do it because Indiana's intentionally like letting him get those shots.
Yeah.
Rightfully so. Give me the under for rebounds on Horford at 7.5 at -120. Played 40 minutes in game one. He's an older guy, so that's not going to be the easiest recovery process, but he also only had 6 in that game, and he's gone under 7.5 rebounds in 7 of his last 8 games against Indiana. They play fast. He's going to be switched on to Siakam, which might drag him away from the basket, and I think you might see more Cornet minutes in this game, just to try to keep Horford relatively healthy and not totally exhausted. But Cornet only played 13 minutes in game one. I could see that going up a bit, so you might see a little bit of a reduction there for Horford minutes. Give me Horford, though. The under on his rebounds at 7.5 at -120 as my lock. For my dog, I think I actually am going to go with the Boston team total in this one. Probably going to be an alt. I think that Boston really could walk into 120 in almost every single one of these games. Indiana defensively is not very good. We know this. They play fast, which is also good for the team total. And Boston really didn't shoot that well from the floor. They went to the line 30 times, which helped. And maybe Scott Foster will help with that once again. But I think you're looking at Boston potentially pushing 120 in this game. So let me just quickly see what I can find for a team total, an alt one for Boston. But I know you were on it in game one. They got to 117 regulation, and that involved some really ugly offense in the last couple of minutes. But if you want to end up going with Boston team total, you can find the team total over 119.5 at +135. That'll be my dog.
All right. All right, for my lock, I'm gonna go with the first half over. It's at 115 right now. They put up 100 and what was it, 126, 128 in game one. I just think it'll come out of the gate again. Both offenses just clicking on all cylinders. And then maybe it slows down a little bit in the second half because that's what really happened in game one, where they only combined for 106 points in the second half. But yeah, it was 64-64 at the end of the first half. So Indiana, we know they'll come out and play with their pace. I think Boston's shot making will be there as well. Maybe they attack the basket a little bit more. Maybe we see a little bit more free throws as well with Scott Foster officiating here tonight. But I do think, again, points. So I'll go with the first half over again at 115. For my dog, probably put together a small or a little player prop parlay in this game. Yeah. So I like the Drew Holiday angle. I'm gonna keep it simple. So I'm gonna go Drew Holiday over on his rebounds and assists. That number is at 10.5, and then give me the assist for Hallie at over 8.5. That will get you to. Oh, I've got to go to the same game parlay section here. Let me redo that. All right, let me go back. So stat combos. Where is Drew Holiday? Drew Holiday's rebounds and assists. Okay, yeah, so we'll do that. Let's go with that. And then, like I mentioned, Hallie on his assist at over 8.5. That will get you to around plus 225 to 30 is a number, is what I'm seeing for that combo there. All right. Scott, let's do our Underdog Fantasy entry, and then we'll get into some NBA stuff happening in with the news that we got this morning. So, again, UnderdogFantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code NBA SGPN. You'll get a bonus cash offer of up to $250 and also a special pick as well when you sign up as a new account holder with Underdog Fantasy. All right. So, you mentioned Tatum and So Tatum for his points and rebounds. You want to throw that in there to start the entry?
There's really no reason not to. I mean, the guy
Yeah.
walks into 30 every time he plays the Pacers.
Okay. So that number is at, let's see here, 41.5. We'll go higher on that. Um, let's do, I like the Drew Holiday one. I think that number is a little low for him on his rebounds and assists.
Okay. And you want to go with Horford, the under rebounds? It is correlated in a way to the Holiday
Yeah.
one.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, so we'll keep it simple there. All right, so we'll go. We got to throw one from the Pacers side.
Oh.
Yeah.
You want Obi?
I'll take, let's take, I'll take Holiday out.
I thought you have one. I thought you had Halliburton from the Pacers.
No, we had Tatum, we had Holiday, and then we had Horford.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we got to do one. So I'll take Holiday out, and then I'll put in Hallie for his assists. So let me go back to that. All right, 8.5 is a number on that. All right, so our entry here tonight for Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals on Underdog Fantasy: Jason Tatum points and rebounds, higher 41.5. Al Horford, lower 7.5 rebounds, and then we'll go Tyrese Halliburton on the Pacers, higher 8.5 assists. That $10 entry will get you a return of $60 for Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Again, guys, make sure you use that promo code NBASGPN. All right, so that is everything that's happening for Game 2. If you guys want to stick around and listen to us talk about JB Bickerstaff and the firing with the Cleveland Cavaliers or getting dismissed, we'll get into that here in a second. But again, Eastern Conference Finals Game 2 here tonight. Definitely excited for it. Hopefully, it's another competitive game as we saw in Game 1. All right, Scott. So we talked about this after the series was over between Orlando and Cleveland, and we've seen this be a theme, especially in the NBA and the sometimes in the NFL as well, that the coach really gets the blame for the lack of success for a team after what I think like 3 years is like down the window that you're getting for a lot of these coaches. But I know you mentioned that you've never really been a JB Bickerstaff guy, but I think in particular this season in the playoffs, I mean, I don't know what goes on in the locker room where players agree with his philosophies or his coaching styles as well, but this Cleveland team was decimated by injuries. I mean, they got through in round 1 primarily without Jared Allen, but round 2 against the Boston Celtics where it really did catch up to the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it just seemed like it was something that was inevitable. I know you mentioned this several times as well, but looks like, yeah, I mean, not looks like, but JB Bickerstaff out the door at Cleveland. They'll start their search for a new head coach in Cleveland.
Yeah, I'll start off with how the season went for them. It was fun. They had a good run middle of the season when they were missing a couple guys. I think they won like 18 of 19 games or 17 of 18 games. They went on a crazy run, and they immediately regressed back down to earth. But I think the roster's got some issues just based on the chemistry or lack thereof with Mitchell and Garland. It does not feel like they belong together at all. Mobley and Allen have kind of had some issues together, and then Allen got injured. So that really didn't matter for the playoffs. But if I told you going into the year, Cleveland was going to lose in the second round to a 1 seed, how would you feel? That'd be pretty standard. And that'd be like the big expectation for this team. So they didn't underachieve by any means. You could argue that they shouldn't have had to go to 7 against Orlando, and that series got dicey because they almost ended up potentially losing in Game 7. They were down double digits and had a massive comeback. But it doesn't really matter. The point is they got through the first series. They lost to the best team in the league based on record, and they were missing half their team by the series at the end. So I'm not blaming Bickerstaff for the end. I don't think there was any coach on the planet that would have won a series with that roster against Boston. And the fact that they won a game out of that, good for them. As for everything else, there's a lot of underlying themes here, which is as to why Bickerstaff got fired. First things first, this is basically what happened with Vogel in Phoenix. They just tossed him out because they didn't want to actually blame the players. And a big reason for that is they have a certain guy who is a pretty important piece of that team who's a free agent. And according to reports, he really did not like Bickerstaff. And according to some recent quotes he's had, yes, you want to keep good PR, so I don't actually believe it. But apparently Donovan Mitchell wants to stay in Cleveland. Do I believe that? No. But I think that when the team that you are currently on can offer you significantly more money than other teams, you probably don't want to piss them off. especially
Yeah.
for a sign trade potentially. So I think Cleveland knew going into the offseason, if we have any chance to bring back Mitchell, even if it's like 2%, we have to fire Bickerstaff because Mitchell, according to reports, that was one thing that bothered me. The Athletic released I think it was The Athletic, released a list of complaints about the coach that was kind of like tallied up over the course of the year. Same thing happened with Darvin Ham with the Lakers, which I guess is the new thing. You just keep your mouth shut until the coach gets fired, and then you unload all the crap that apparently everyone's been thinking about him for the last 8 months. That's apparently the new thing to do this offseason. Same thing happened to Bickerstaff, where nobody really heard much about his turmoil in the locker room and with the overall players. And the next thing you know, as soon as he's on the hot seat, there's a report that comes out, dozens of pages, going, oh, yeah, the players thought Bickerstaff sucked. And it's like, I'm sorry, where was this throughout the course of the season? So a part of it makes me believe that it is a last-ditch effort to make Mitchell happy. I think that even though Bickerstaff was not a coach that I liked in particular, and I'm not going to fully blame him for what happened in the playoffs with Cleveland, because there's nothing he should have been able to do against Boston when half your team's injured. I do think part of it is Mitchell clearly did not like this guy, and Cleveland's doing whatever the hell they can to try to keep him in Cleveland and to keep him happy. Is it going to work? Probably not. But I think you'd agree, based on how quickly this thing unfolded, I think Mitchell's pulling some strings behind the scenes. You agree or disagree?
I agree. Again, like you mentioned, maybe it's just a last ditch effort to keep Donovan Mitchell around. He says he wants to stay there. I think there's going to have to be some significant roster construction needed to be done for this team to be competitive in Cleveland. But as far as the coaching stuff goes, I mean, it's just always how it goes, that there's always an article ready or there's a dirty laundry list already ready to come
But it's
out
after
once.
the guy's like officially on the hot seat when the season's over. Nobody said anything until the season was over. And now you have to pass the blame on to the coach immediately.
Yeah, and again, the NBA is a league where it's player driven, and you want to keep your players happy because of the amount of money that these owners are investing in these players. And it's sometimes unfair to the coaches because if they have 2 bad seasons, that hey, that's it, that's all you get. But I mean, it takes a lot longer for, I think like another example will be Quinn Snyder. Like if he has another bad season or two in the next 2 years, does Atlanta let him go just because they won't have success? I mean, we'll see what Trae Young ends up for the Atlanta Hawks, but I think that's
Or
just another prime
DeJounte or
example.
both.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, that we probably did see this coming for JB Bickerstaff. We'll see who they end up hiring. I think the 2 names that I saw were Kenny Atkinson of
I
the
saw
Golden State
Borregos
Warriors, and I saw Borrego. Yeah, that's what the other one that I
Which
saw.
is kind of ironic because I'm being critical of Cleveland firing Bickerstaff under these circumstances, but I like Atkinson and Borregos more than Bickerstaff as a coach. So I guess that's the irony of the situation because I actually like those 2 guys. But I do think that the way that this whole thing unfolded kind of just stinks from either a player empowerment movement angle and B, just some behind the scenes potential looming free agency where Mitchell, according to reports, really did not like Bickerstaff. And I think that's definitely a factor. Is it going to matter? Probably not. Do I think Mitchell's going to stay in Cleveland? I do not. In the words of Joakim Noah, you think Cleveland's cool? I never heard anybody say they want to go to Cleveland on vacation. Like, I think at the end of the day, star athletes don't want to get paid $50 million a season if they're going to live in Cleveland. We know Mitchell likes New York. We know he likes Miami. I think he'll prefer a different destination. A sign and trade might be in the works, maybe, but I think you'd agree as a small market team like Cleveland, who's in a location that most, I'd say, NBA players don't really like. You had an all-star game in Cleveland and nobody cared. I feel like it's a spot where most star players will want to do whatever they can to get out of Cleveland as opposed to staying in Cleveland. Would you agree with that?
If you were paying me $50 million to just shut my mouth and play in Cleveland, I would do it. I was watching.
What if I told you you're getting $50 million in Cleveland, or if you were getting like $45 million in Miami?
I would go to Miami because there's no state income tax there either, and it's
Donovan Mitchell.
Miami.
Come on down.
Yeah, I was watching. Before we wrap it up here, I was watching. I know there was rumors also that Jalen Brunson was ready to sign an extension earlier to save some money for the New York Knicks to use, in free agency or whatever, or to re-sign his guys that are there. And it said that he was making $26 million this season, and they went through all the taxes that are in New York. And like at the end of it, he was only like the number that goes into his account was like 14 million. So
It's
like
not as bad
12
as
million.
California, but it's not good.
Yeah, 12 million of that 26 was going to taxes, just because he was playing in New York. And it's funny because how some of the dynamics go because they play in these different states, and how the taxes do end up for a lot of these
That's why I
players.
thought
But
Dallas would get a lot of free agents over the years, or even San Antonio. People can argue San
yeah,
Antonio's in trouble because they have Wemby and nobody else. No income tax really helps if you want to get some free agents in there. So
I can attest to that for sure. No income tax, definitely, especially if you're going to be making 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars.
yeah. And with how the contracts are going up in the league, like you might want to try to save as much money as you can from taxes.
Was like Jalen Brown's making what, like 60 million, the highest
I don't know
paid
what it is
player in the
after
NBA.
taxes, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
All right. Anything else in the NBA we need to touch on?
Not really.
That
I
was the
wanted to
bigger
mention
news.
that. I saw Brendan Jennings go on a podcast and say that he thinks Malik Monk's a better player than Mitchell, and I'm convinced we gave NBA players too many platforms.
He probably has CTE. I don't know.
He might. I mean, I think he was on the Arena show, which I do think is an industry plant show of just providing the worst hot takes imaginable for actual clicks.
Yeah.
I think it's like the Deadspin of NBA podcasts. I feel like that's kind of how I view it. But at the same point, there's just so many former NBA players that I think don't actually watch basketball or don't know what they're watching when they watch basketball. And it just bothers me. Like,
Yeah.
how do you spend your entire life playing this and you don't understand how it works? Isn't that weird?
It's so yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, it's really on Gilbert Arenas' pods with some of these. Some of it just makes me shake my head. Some of the stuff that's I don't even bother finishing watching or listening to what they're saying, just because sometimes it's so out of this world on what they say. But yeah, I do think it's like more for clickbait and
The
things
takes
like
are
that.
so bad that you assume automatically, just for their own sake, that it's clickbait because the ticks are just that out of pocket.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well, yeah, we'll try to obviously with only one game a day, more of this NBA news does start coming out about whether it's free as you approach free agency, draft stuff, players getting or coaches getting fired, coaches getting hired. We'll talk about that as well, especially only like we mentioned, only one game a day now until we get to the NBA finals. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the NBA Gambling Podcast. If you guys want to hang around, Chris and I will be doing a propcast for both game twos for the Eastern Conference Finals for tonight, and then also for game 2 of the Western Conference Finals in a couple of minutes here. So if you want to hang out with us and get down on some player props as well, you guys make sure to follow Scott on Twitter. That's at Reichel Radio. You can follow me there as well at SportsNerd824. Also, make sure you guys check out the WNBA Gambling Podcast. I know the guys did a show last night for the games tonight, so check us out, or check them out, I should say, for the WNBA Gambling Podcast. And of course, subscribe to the podcast wherever you do get your pods, whether it's on Spotify, whether it's Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever the case might be. All right, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow, game 2 of the Western Conference Finals with Scott and Terrell. Till then, good luck with your bets here tonight. Let's break these books off and let it ride.